there are 33 allusions to the Antichrist with different names mentioning the Antichrist in the Old Testament alone. There's 13 in the New. Let's continue. Revelation 17:8. The beast you saw was once alive, but isn't now, and yet he will soon come up out of the bottomless pit. What? This guy's coming up out of the bottomless pit. Nimrod is coming back. His demonic spirit will be released out of the bottomless pit. Now, what does that mean? If he's going to be coming out of the bottomless pit, he's a spirit, which means he's going to need a body to inhabit, right? Okay? Revelation 13:3 says, talking about the future Antichrist, I saw that one of the heads of the beast were wounded beyond recovery, but the fatal wound was healed, and the whole world marveled at this miracle, and they gave allegiance to the beast. There will be a man that will come on the scene as a person that can bring order to the world that is falling apart. The world is already starting to fall apart. We're getting closer every day to the world that is falling apart. This man will be well liked. He'll be well known. He's alive and alive right now, I believe. He will be put in control of one of the 10 new world kingdoms that are in place, but not kings yet, at that time period. He will likely resemble Nimrod. In other words, he's going to be, if he does resemble Nimrod, he will be a tall black man. And at some point, people will believe that he is the reincarnation of Nimrod. The deeper we go, you just remember these things, it falls into place. But when this man is rising to power, he will get a head wound. Okay? Somebody is going to be on the other side of the rapture that has heard a message like this or has read a book about this kind of stuff, and that person is probably going to sneak in behind this guy and shoot him in the head and kill him. That is getting ready to happen at some point in time. But through the demonic power of Satan, that man will come back to life again. When he comes back to life again, he will have that Nimrod spirit out of the bottomless pit. I believe that this is when he and others will claim that he is the long-awaited Messiah. The Jewish people, the Jewish people, did not accept Jesus as the Messiah. They're still looking for the Messiah. The Muslims are still looking for their Messiah. So this guy that's going to come on the scene, he's going to have to play the part to the Jews and to the Muslims and to everybody else so that everybody will be sucked into this disaster and believe that this man is the one true Messiah, Jesus Christ, that represents him. He will die, and Satan will raise him back to life with Nimrod's spirit inside of him, deceiving all the people of the world. Now let's continue where we left off in verse 8. And the people who belong to this world, whose names were not written in the book of life before the world was made. Before the world was even made, God knew who was going to accept him and who wasn't. They will be amazed at the reappearance of the beast who had died. Both of the beasts mentioned earlier had 7 heads. So what do these 7 heads symbolize? Revelation 17:9 and 10 says, this calls for a mind with understanding. The 7 heads of the beast represent 7 hills where the woman rules. They also represent 7 kings. 5 had fallen. We're going to read it again a time or two. 5 kings have fallen, 6 now reigns, the 7th is yet to come. His reign will be brief. When we look at these 2 verses, we find out that these 7 heads represents 2 different things. Mountains, 7 kings. This verse even explains where these mountains are, and we'll talk about that just in a minute. Right now, we're going to talk about the 7 kings. In end times prophecy, 7 kings can mean literally 7 kings or the 7 kingdoms. Kingdoms is what, if you decipher this message, kingdoms is what we're talking about here. We're not talking about 7 individual kings. We're talking about 7 kingdoms. The book of Revelation was given to John in or about 95 AD, roughly 62 years after Jesus ascended into heaven. So in verse 10 it says, 5 had fallen, and 1 is, meaning up to that point of 95 AD, one world kingdoms. There was a lot of kingdoms, but these were the 5 world kingdoms that controlled the whole world. They dominated them all. And what are those 5? Well, we know them as Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, or Babylonian Empire, Medo-Persian, and the Grecian Empire. Then the message states that the 6th kingdom now reigns. Well, we know who that was. That was the Roman Empire. They are the instigators behind a lot of things. But we know that that was the Roman Empire. They were in full control of the world from 68 BC till 476 AD, or for 544 years, making it the longest-running world kingdom in history. Egypt would have come in at a close second at 500 years. One question to ask here is, did the Roman Empire actually lose control in 476? If you read your history books and you look at different things, it all indicates that yes, they did at 476. They did not end at 476. Here's the reason why. The Roman Empire went through some changes, very, very deceptive changes. Let me explain. The Roman Empire was by far the cruelest empire ever in the history of mankind. They had no intentions of ever losing any of their power, no matter what the cost was. They wasn't going to lose out. They was going to stay in control. Power-hungry scum. When Jesus came on the scene around 30 AD, the Roman Empire did not see Jesus Christ as a threat to them. I mean, if you think about it, when Jesus come on the scene, he had a robe on and he had a pair of flip-flops on, and that was it. That's all he had in the world. He didn't come in a Rolls Royce, okay? He didn't come in with the military behind him. So when they seen him, they didn't think nothing of him. They didn't think nothing about him. If you remember, when they took him before Pilate, Pilate said, he said, I don't see anything that this guy's done. And Pilate said, I see no fault in this man, and he washed his hands of him. He never thought nothing about this Jesus at this point in time. But on the other hand, the high and mighty Jewish Pharisees, the preachers and the teachers of God at this point in time, had let their heads get so inflated, and they were so struck on themselves, and they was taking in all the praises for themselves. They were trying, in essence, to be God, basically. All right? But they, his own people, did feel threatened by this Jesus. The people were coming in, the people that were coming into the synagogues and bringing in the money, they were following this man with this robe on and a pair of flip-flops. They were following him all over the place. So I'm sure the money kind of dried up in the synagogues. They didn't like that. These people are the very ones that turned against Jesus, the very ones that done all the lying on Jesus, tried every way in the world to catch him into something, and they are the ones that went to the Roman Empire, to Pilate, to the council, and basically demanded that they torture him, kill him, or crucify him to death. Okay? They're the ones that did it. Jesus' own people done it. After Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, he told his disciples, he said, I'm going to be leaving you guys, but I'm going to send you a comforter. That comforter we know was the Holy Spirit. Amen. On the day of Pentecost, did you know the day of Pentecost is one of the most important, pivotal days in our history, especially as Christians? Because the day of Pentecost is when the remaining 11 disciples were filled with the Holy Spirit in the room. And when they went out, it was a festival going on, and when they went out, there were thousands gathered, and it said that 3,000 people were saved. They were born again. Amen. I don't even ask people anymore. I have learned this by the hard way. I don't even ask people anymore if you've been saved. You know why I don't, Brother Jonathan?
Go ahead.
Because every time I ask somebody if they've been saved, yep, I've been saved. Yep, I got saved at 8 years old. Heard just the other day. Got saved at 8 years old. This guy was talking to me. He was cussing up one side, down the other. Young guy's got 3 kids. I said, do you actually kiss your children with that mouth? I mean, seriously. And I said, man, you need to be saved. I've been saved. I am saved. And I said, man, you don't show no proof. So I have learned not to ask anybody if you've been saved. Ask the people, have you been born again? That throws them for a wall. They're like, huh? What are you talking about? It's kind of like Nicodemus. You know, when he came to Jesus and Jesus said, unless a man be born again, and Nicodemus was like, how in the world can I enter into the mother's womb? Had no clue. You ask somebody, if you want to know about their standing with God, just ask them if they've been born again. Okay. So my eyes adjusted here. All right, where we at? Okay. That's what I always do now. Now that's fast forward. All right. Jesus is left. 3,000 people saved. 30 years into the future. Okay. So we're up around 63 AD at this point in time. The Christians were springing up everywhere. Now they got the attention of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire seen all these Christians coming up, and they got worried. That may be a little bit of a challenge for a Roman Empire. In 64 AD, the Romans began persecuting Christians. In 64 AD. By 303 AD, at the urging of Caesar Galerius, Emperor Diocletian began the last major persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire, resulting in the destruction of churches and the torture and execution of Christians who refused to sacrifice to the Roman gods. Who were the Roman gods? Nimrod, Semiramis, Horus, but with different names. They had different names. Their names at that point in time was Jupiter, Mars, Apollo, and others. Okay? But it was still the same old Nimrod, Semiramis, and Horus. Diocletian, very cruel emperor, Diocletian was the first emperor to resign his post. When you became emperor of the Roman Empire, you were the emperor of that empire until you died. Kind of like our Supreme Court justices, which I kind of wish it wasn't that way for some of them, but anyway, that they were emperor until they died. But he resigned his post. Now, it is said and documented that he resigned because it was due to illness. However, most theologians and people that I have read about and talked about, they don't believe that's what the problem was. They believe that the problem was he could not eradicate the Christians. His troops would go out and kill thousands and thousands of Christians. And the next day, week, or whatever, there'd be thousands and thousands more Christians. They were getting saved left and right. People knew the truth and they were accepting it. They were getting saved. So I believe he just gave up. That's what I believe. Okay? Then the Galerius that we was talking about just a second ago, he succeeded as Augustus. I guess that's something like an emperor, I'm not for sure, in 305. And he continued killing and persecuting until 311 AD without full success. Now, this is where everything gets interesting. In 313 AD, a very clever emperor came onto the scene. His name was Constantine. Okay? Yeah, completely lost my place. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I got to put the card here. I can't see nothing. Okay. Constantine came up with a brilliant scheme, and I'm telling you, this was brilliant. To keep the Roman Empire in global control forever, Constantine knew that if he could not stop the growth of these true Christians, that they would, in fact, at some point in the near future, overthrow the Roman Empire. He knew it was coming. So, what was his brilliant scheme? 7 words. 7 words was his brilliant scheme. If you can't beat them, join them. That was the scheme. That was the scam. If you can't beat them, then we'll join them. How did he get this scheme to work? Simple. Constantine was preparing to go into battle against Maximus at the Milvian Bridge in Rome. Constantine goes to all of his troops and he tells them, he says, he claimed that he saw this vision of this cross-looking thing. It was an X, looked like it had a P in the middle of it. He claimed that that was a Christian symbol, and he saw this in the sky. Some say he dreamed it at night. Some say he had a vision, different things. But he tells his troops that he wants that painted on all of their armor, all of their shields. So they did it. He goes into battle, he wins the war. All right? Constantine, who was a pagan sun god worshiper, told everyone that he had converted to Christianity. In order to make the scheme work, he converted to Christianity. He issued the Edict of Milan in February 313 so that Christians would not be persecuted any longer. Soon after, he made Christianity the official religion of Rome. How do you go from killing thousands and thousands and thousands of Christians one day to making them the official religion of the Roman Empire the next? There's got to be a little scamming going on, right? You agree? Anybody agree with me? Okay. Then he takes it a step further, he began building churches for all the Christians to come into. Man, if you think about it, Constantine was the Christians' new superhero. Yeah. I mean, good lands, this guy is Superman. They love this guy. I mean, they built up their trust in him so quick, it wouldn't matter what they told him, they'd have believed it because, man, we don't have to worry about going out of the house and somebody cutting our heads off or burning us at the stake. We don't have to worry about that no more. We've got a superhero that's all for us. They poured into this new church like pouring water over a waterfall. I mean, they were rolling into this church. The problem was that when the Christians came into this church, so did the false sun god idols and rituals. All that mess was brought into the church too and combined as one. Okay? Those Christians were probably so happy that not to be worried about getting killed and persecuted, they probably didn't even really question these church practices. They just thought it was okay. This brings us to the second part of our message, which is the woman that rides the beast. As I begin to explain the remainder of this message, I want to say right now that 1.2 billion people on earth right now belong to or have been deceived by what was created by Constantine. This is a hard message to preach, so bear with me, pray for us. This message, or this church, is what the Bible calls. The Bible calls it, not Mark Carnes, the Bible calls it the great prostitute. The proof is all over the place. We're going to talk about it. The great prostitute. I am in no way saying that all the people that belongs to this false church are bad. They're not. They've just been deceived. And some have actually done their own Bible studies and become born again. Great. And got out of that. And that's awesome. There's a lot of people that's done that. God devoted the entire chapter of Revelation 17 and part of 18 to try and warn people of this disaster, this monster that was created by Constantine, and how to get out of it, and warning them to get out of it as we go further. This was not just only to the people of the past 1,700 years, but it's talking about what is going to happen in the future also. You've got to remember, there are two verses that I always use when I'm studying and trying to decipher prophecy. You can use it for anything. Ecclesiastes 1:9 and Ecclesiastes, I think it's 3:5, they basically say the same thing. They say that there is nothing new under the sun. Everything that has happened before will happen again. Okay? When you look at that in perspective of what we talk about and what we see, I mean, if you look at the Bible and the things that has happened, some of them have already happened twice. Okay? But when you're looking at future prophecy, a lot of that is coming has already happened. If you look at what we're talking about now, it's really happened, but it's going to happen again. I want to explain or show you some of the events that has taken place in the last 1,700 years. Now, this list was actually that long, and Tanya and I looked at it and cut it down because she knew I was going to be talking for 3 hours, and I don't know how long we're going, but I'm trying to hurry up. Okay, so all this stuff started in 313 AD, but in 315 AD, the Roman Church adapted prayer for the dead in hell. Really? They adapted prayer for the dead in hell. That kind of goes against the Bible. All right? 5 years later, they adapted wax candle worship into the church, another form of pagan worship. Pagan worship, not worship of God, but pagan worship. A year later, they abolished the Sabbath day worship, and they replaced it with Sunday, the sun god day. We're here at the wrong day. Sunday is not the day that we are supposed to take it easy and focus on God. Yesterday was the Sabbath. Today is the first day of the week. The first day of the week is actually the day of the sun god. Okay? They changed that. Look how quick they done this. What, 321, 313, 8 years down the road, they've done changed the Sabbath day so that they could praise somebody else maybe? Okay, let's move on. 325, the Roman church abolished the Jewish Passover of the Bible. Said it don't exist. That kind of goes against the Bible. Here's a good one for you. 354, the Roman church introduced December 25th as the birthday of Jesus. Okay? Most all theologians that has went back and done the research and the time periods and what they were pulling out of the ground at that time will tell you Jesus was born in September, not December 25th. So why on earth would this apostate church, this disastrous, this monster that was created by Constantine, why in the world would they make December 25th Jesus' birthday? It was actually Nimrod's birthday. That's the day he was born on. Nimrod was born on December 25th. You see what they're doing? They're taking things out and replacing it with pagan stuff. They're taking things out and they're replacing it. And they're doing it very subtle, very sneaky, very underhanded. All right? Now, this is where it even gets better. 375 AD. The Roman church began to worship dead saints. Worship dead saints. What does the first commandment of the Ten Commandments say? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Amen. When you worship anything or anybody or anything other than God, you're worshiping the wrong thing and it's against God, right? Amen. I mean, you can't sugarcoat this stuff. That's what it is, okay? They begin to worship dead saints. Like, wow. All right? 431. The Roman church began to worship Mary as the mother of God instead of Jesus. Mary was the new name of Semiramis. In every culture, they just named Semiramis a different name, Horus a different name. In 600 AD, the Roman church started teaching people to pray for dead saints and angels. How many angels have you heard about dying lately? Okay? This is craziness. It's ludicrous. In 890, the Roman church began to worship Joseph as the father of Jesus again. You can worship Mary, you can worship angels, you can worship dead saints, you can worship Joseph. Don't worship Jesus. Don't worship God, but you can worship everything else. That's basically what they were doing. 1095, the Vatican began crusades. You know what crusades is? It's not a Billy Graham crusade. A crusade is a war. When you have crusades, you've got a church going out and starting wars with other people to keep their domination. The crusades, the wars against Islam, they started to recover the Holy Land, Jerusalem. And man, we could go in that and stay for 2 days. But they wanted to get the Holy Land from the Arabs at that time, Islam, the Muslims, whatever what you want to call them. They wanted to capture that because they wanted to put the Vatican right there on the center of the earth. Did you know that Temple Mount is the center of all the landmass? That's as close to the center as you can get. It's the center of the world. That's where God, in my opinion, that's where the Garden of Eden would have been. The tree of knowledge would have probably, it said it was in the center of the garden, so if the garden had been there, because all the way all the rivers run through it, when you do the investigation on it, you will find out that it was probably 1,500 by 1,500 miles square, and everything would have flowed right through it, just as it talks about in the Bible. And the tree of knowledge of good and evil would have probably been right there where Temple Mount's at. It's also where Abraham took Isaac to sacrifice him to God. Same place. Very important piece of real estate. They wanted to build their Vatican there. They wanted to show the whole world, we're God, we've got it. Okay? This didn't work out for them a little bit. God's had his hand in some of this stuff too. He stopped them. The Knights Templar was organized to lead and oversee the Crusades, wars. 1163, Pope Alexander laid